Alright guys, this is a highly anticipated video which is going to be a dupe tier list again, but this time for the mid blocker position. Now the scoring system I'm going to use is exactly the same as last time, so if you don't know what they are, I'll have them all written out here. Or you can also watch my previous video which was on the opposite hitter and also the liberal position, and I will explain exactly what they all mean in those contexts, okay? Now, once again, just to remind you guys, the tier list here is not an indication of how strong that character is, but more an indication of how much resources you want to put in order to actually dupe them. So, for example, to give you an example here, I have Herugami at SL1, score of 3, but that dropped down to only a score of 2 as skill rating 2 and 4. That's obviously not to say Herugami got worse as you dupe him up. It's just that the resource or the buff that he will be getting at those higher skill resistance is not as important, for example, to his base kit as skill resistance 1. Okay, so that's basically the way you want to interpret it. It's not the actual absolute strength of the characters. Okay, so let's just go straight into the tier list. So start off, we have Virgin Kuroo. I'm gonna put 0 all around because there's just no point in summoning for him. He is okay as a hybrid block and also quick attack character, but to be all honesty, Suki is able to do that already. So personally, I don't think there's any need for Kuroo anymore. And the other also important thing is that if you play Kuroo, then you can't play SP Kuroo. So it's just not really worth the trade-off. Okay, next up we have Virgin Herugami. I give his base level a score of 3 because he's actually able to provide insane amount of buff in terms of the attack and also defense technique he's able to provide, and those are some of the more rare buff as well. So it's very useful at base level. Skill rating 2 and skill rating 4 they're okay, but nothing crazy. So that's kind of what I gave them a score of 2. Which remember that's kind of the baseline, which basically means that's kind of what I would expect from that much resource. It's not really crazy amount. It's not worse. It's not worse the amount. It's just the baseline version. Okay, that's what to be expected when you dupe someone up. Next up, we are going to have Hinata as skill resonance 1. So the basic copy, I'm going to give him a score of 2. He does fit a bit of a special role of being the only one with a receive and also quick spike. I mean, I'm excluding SP Virgin Korai because he literally have everything, but outside of him, SP Hinata is the only one with receive and quick spike. Now, whilst that could potentially be useful, the reality is that you're only going to focus on one of them, and in this case, it's going to be quick spike anyway. And he also somewhat makes the liberal substitution slightly awkward, especially if you actually want to sub out the mid blocker. So that's kind of why, for me, he's only a baseline of 2 as well. Then as skill rating 2, he gets an unblockable quick, which is nice. I won't say it's game breaking because a lot of characters have that, so that's why it's only a score of 4. And then as skill rating 4, he's gonna get a crazy amount of strength buff, so he will be able to hit very hard when he has a crit. So that's kind of why it's a crazy buff. Okay, next up we have Aone. Aone, I have actually tested him. I'll probably post a video in the future. But so far, what I have noticed is that I have the exact same team, but I just swap out my Virgin Herugami to the SP Virgin Aone, and both of them were as skill resistance too. And Aone actually caused me to drop my win rate, or at least I feel like that's the reason I dropped in win rate recently, in comparison to using Virgin Herugami. So in some sense, this kind of shows that even though SP Aone is actually able to block very high numbers, but because he actually lacks a team buff that Virgin Herugami is able to provide, I don't actually think it's that good anymore. So that's kind of why the base copy is for me just a 2. It's just kind of what you expect from an SP mid blocker, nothing special. And then for skill rating 2 is going to be a score of 5 because essentially he actually now able to give an insane amount of buff as a pinch server. That's something he wouldn't be able to get beforehand, and this is a massive value, so that's kind of why it's a score of 5 here. And then if you actually have him as skill resonance 4, he can also give a 25% buff to of the blocks that when he's on the bench. So once again, that's a brand new mechanic because that skill rating 2 is still kind of need that pinch server thing. With this, you can't just have him on the bench the whole time. But 25% increase in block stat is not, I mean, it's not nothing special. It's not like amazing amount. So that's kind of why I don't classify as a game breaking, and that's why it's only a score of 4 rather than 5. Okay, next up we are gonna have Suki. So SP version of Suki, base level, I was debating a bit on whether or not it's 2 or 3 because he is able to do both block and quick spot very well, but the thing is he is more like I think his block is in line with other mid blockers' block, and his quick spike is in line with other characters' quick spike. It's more that his secondary ability is slightly stronger than other secondary ability. So basically, for example, if you build him as a blocker, his block is same as other blockers, but his quick attack is going to be better than other blockers. And same thing, if you build him as a quick attacker, his quick attack is just as good as other characters' quick attack, but his block is the one that slightly stands out a bit more in comparison to other quick attack. So in some senses that he doesn't really shine much more than everyone else at the skill that he most frequently use. It's more the secondary skill where he are going to see a bit of a jump in comparison to others. I'm not sure whether or not I would consider that as like a good amount of buff to justify a score of 3. So that's kind of why I kept him only at a score of 2, okay? And then skill resistance 2, he is able to get a bit of attack and also defense tactic for himself. And also he does have this ability where his skill 1 previously only triggers when your team use block or quick spike skill. Now you are also able to trigger when when the opponent have a debuff, etc. But the thing is that debuff just calls to a bit more stats buff in terms of his own block and quick stats. So even though it's kind of like a new mechanic, but at the end of the day, that new mechanic is just to give him more stats buff. So that's kind of why I kept him only at a score of 3 rather than a score of 4. However, at skill resistance 4, he can actually now get unblockable spike. So that's kind of why it's a score of 4 here. Okay. Then for SP Kuroo, base version is going to be a score of 4 because he is, once again, with the exception of SP Hoshimi Kora, he's the only one with both a block and also receive ability. And whilst for some other character, for example SP Hinata I mentioned, you can't really have him be built both as a receive and also quick spike. So that's kind of why it's only a baseline score. For Kuroo is different because both block and receive, they're both defensive actions, and what that basically means is that if you actually build him with like let's say spirit, reflex, and the defense technique, which would essentially buff up both his block and receive, then he can actually satisfy both roles very well. And that's kind of why I'm going to give him a score 4, because unlike others who kind of need to juggle between playing 2 different roles, he can actually play those 2 roles together at the same time. Okay, so that's kind of why it's a score 4. No other character is able to do that. And then for skill resistance 1, it's a score of 3 because he just basically buff up your team based on scaling, based on his own block stat. And also if the spike is at the back, he gives more buff. Okay, so it's a really nice buff, but nothing special. So that's kind of why it's a score 3. And then same for skill resistance 4. He gets a bit of a defense technique, which like I said, is actually very important for him. And also when he's surfing, you will be able to give extra buff for your whole team as well. So while surfing is kind of like a new mechanism, but at the end of the day, the main point is that you will be giving a buff to the rest of the team. So that's kind of why I still classify it as a strong buff rather than as a new mechanics. Okay, now let's move on to Tendo. Tendo skill resonance 1. He basically have an ultimate attack which is 0 cooldown, but they increase over time. So in honesty, it probably average out to be similar to other characters. I don't think it will be particularly more than other characters. And then skill resonance 2, he gets this ability which I think increases his spirit based on his strength. But in all honesty, I don't think anyone's actually going to build Tendo with strength, so that feels to me is a bit of like a no point. And then he also increased his awareness, but his awareness also decreased. So once again, I don't feel like there's a particular need for that. So that's kind of why it's a score of 1, nor worth the resource. But then at skill resonance 4, I do feel like it can be somewhat justified in the sense that whenever your teammate crit, not crit, I said whenever your teammate use ultimate attack, they're going to get a small buff into all of their basic stats. Now, the number is not actually that high, but this is for the whole team whenever someone uses an ultimate attack, and then it's also going to be for all of the basic stats, so basically all of the character will benefit from that. So that to me is still good enough in terms of buff, so that's why I scored 3 here. Then for Herugami has a crazy skill 1, which is available even at base level, so that's why I scored 5. Basically, it's able to reduce the cooldown, ultimate cooldown for any character with a block ultimate. Now, on a first look, this is just a massive improvement already to the likes of, well, to anyone with a block ultimate, to be honest. But then for the likes of Suki, who literally have 2 ultimate attack, and also Hoshimi Korai as skill resonance 4, who also have 2 automata. This is actually going to reduce the cooldown for both of them. And he literally get that out of box, so that's a crazy ability. So that's kind of why I score 5 here. Skill resonance 1, he is able, sorry, skill resonance 2, he's able to reduce his own cooldown when I think the enemy crit, which to be honest happens a lot. So once again, you are able to spam a lot more. That to me is worth it, and it's a bit new mechanics. So that's kind of why it's a score 4 here. And then the last one is just gonna be a very, very high amount of buff in terms of reflex, etc. But nothing new, like it's just an existing stat, but obviously you have it higher, so that's kind of why it's a score 3. Then we move on to Lief. Lief at the base level, I'll put him either a score of 2 or a score of 5. Basically, if you just play him by himself, I feel like there's nothing outstanding for him and will just be a baseline score of 2. However, if you play him up with the newest version of SP Kenma, so Kenma V2, then they're going to get a crazy deployment bomb, which is like by far like an insane deployment bomb, I have to say. And that would immediately shoot him up to 5. Okay, like there's no doubt about that. So that's kind of why I put him either 2 or 5, depending on whether or not you're also going to have SP Kenma V2. As skill resonance 2, he's able to buff the character with the scoring ace status. But if you have watched my review for SP Leah previously, you know that that scoring ace is actually not, it's quite RNG based, because you could also end up getting that because you don't block kill rather than your spikers, etc. So the value of that to me is bare inconsistent, so that's kind of why I'm only going to give it a score of 2. And then for the last one, basically just a bigger number. Okay, so nothing, no new mechanics, just a bigger number in terms of his stats, so that's kind of why it's going to be a score of 3. Okay, so that's going to be my thoughts on all of the mid blockers and where would I value their dupes, etc. Let me know what you guys think in the comment section.